But let's dive right in. If you've never tuned into a positional preview episode here at the DFO Fantasy Show, we cover our consensus top 10 at the position, go in depth on 1 through 10, and then in the second half of the show, we each give you a value pick, an ADP to avoid, and a breakout pick at the position. So again, if this is the first time you've tuned in, make sure you go back and check it out. The center, left wing, right wing, and D episodes are already out there. Again, as D mentioned, goalies are a little bit more of a team-oriented position than kind of an individual position. So I'm going to be referencing their projected season point totals for the team they play for as well, based off the sports books preseason odds. And we will start with Connor Hellebuyck, who is number 1 for us, surprisingly. We've all got him ranked at number 1. His ADP is currently 12.3. It's coming down a bit. It started off in the top of the draft early on here, and then it is slowly dropping as we go. It's at 10.5. I lied to you guys. It's at 10.5. So ADP is currently 10.5. But he was just unbelievable last year. The Jets are projected for 96.5 points this year, which is the 12th best among the NHL. And over the last 4 seasons, Hellebuyck has averaged 63 starts, 37.5 wins, leading the NHL in both of those categories while posting a 247 goals against average and a 919 save percentage. He's also coming off a season last year where the Jets were easily among the top 10 defensive teams in the league, and he ranked either first or second in every single goalie category. Last year he was first in wins, goals against average, and shutouts, and he was second in starts, save percentage, and goals saved above expected per 60. So really, really impressive stuff from Connor Hellebuyck last year. I think he's quite clearly the top goalie off the board. D, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think he's pretty obviously the number 1 goalie off the board. I don't love investing at the position early. Typically, it's the most volatile position out there in fantasy hockey. We see goaltenders' performances fluctuate season to season a lot more than any other position. A lot of that just has to do with a lot of external factors that are outside of their control. You got 5 guys in front of you every single time that are going to affect the type of chances that you're absorbing as the goaltender. So yeah, it's a really volatile position. On top of that, carries a little bit more injury risk, and it's kind of like the running back of fantasy hockey, right? Where you can kind of afford to go late, maybe try to find some guys that look to be in a timeshare that you think can overcome the other 1B that they're going up against, or even just later into the season, kind of work the wire. And as those injuries happen, try to scoop up some backups and just piece it together week by week and not come out too bad for it, especially because, you're obviously, as we've been talking about through each of these episodes, passing up on some really premium talent at the other positions. Having said all that, if there's one guy that's worth kind of burning your first round pick for, it's definitely Connor Hellebuyck. He just brings another level of consistency to the position. If there's anyone that I'm going to trust to deliver me 60 starts and, north of a 915 save percentage, 35 wins, it's going to be Connor Hellebuyck. So because of that, just the consistency and the fact that he should get a whole lot of goal support again this year, I don't think there's any question that he should be the number 1 goalie off the board. I think there should be a little bit more buffer in the ADP between him and the next best goaltender than there is. I think he's kind of closer into kind of like that Makar territory where he's just in a tier of his own at the position.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. And I'm kind of with you there. I don't want to he deserves that top spot, but I don't want to pay that price. I mentioned it years ago on the podcast, but me and D are in a keeper league, and I spent on Shesterkin and Vasilevskiy as my first 2 picks. Well, I've kind of lost every goaltending category for the last few years. So when stuff like that happens, it makes you realize, you can wait, you can find other talent or similar talent. As you mentioned, obviously elite across the board in all categories. So if you do have that swing pick and you're in a bit of a deeper league, it might be worth taking the risk. But I know personally, I would be staying away, going with a few plus 100 point players kind of thing, guys that you can't get that from other positions later in the draft. So yeah, I'd rather go with a superstar here. Not to say Hellebuyck isn't, but a forward or a D-man. So
yeah, if you guys recall last year, I had him as my number 1 goalie overall, and I took him in a lot of leagues in the kind of middle of the second round. Our league of record D, I took him in the, I think, second pick, 6th pick of the second round last year. His ADP was 24. probably reached on him a little bit last year and it paid off in a huge way. Where this year, yeah, like I think that this is a steep price to pay on draft day. As I mentioned off the top, ADP has shifted again. It's up to 10.5. So late first round pick, but we have talked about it on a couple episodes already too, where that late first round right now is a bit of a murky position. And Hellebuyck, I suppose, is a pretty good fallback option, one you can feel pretty safe about if you are unsure about some of the forwards there. So, I think if I sat here and told you that I wouldn't take him at the end of the first round, I'd be lying. Like, I think that there's a chance that I would just feel comfortable with that pick, but it is a steep price to pay. And there's, we're going to talk about a lot of values here that you get a little bit later, but nobody is as safe of a pick as Hellebuyck right now. So number 2 for us is Andrei Vasilevskiy. All three of us have him ranked at number 2. Coming on into last year, again, he was everybody was down on him a little bit. His ADP dropped to 36.4. We had him as our number 5 goalie overall because he did struggle the year previous. Had a huge bounce back year. Vasilevskiy's been one of the NHL's biggest workhorses for years, averaging 60 starts and 35 wins over the last 4 years. He's posted 254 goals against average and a .914 save percentage during that time. But like I said, last year he was massive. 4th in goals against average with a .218 and 4th in save percentage with a .921. So just absolutely outstanding. Kind of put him back on the map as a guy that could he could push Connor Hellebuyck for the number 1 goalie overall in fantasy because 2024 was definitely disappointing, but that's obviously the one that looks like the outlier at this point. 3 out of the last 4 years, he's just been absolutely splendid. To still have like a .914 save percentage, even though he had a shitty year in 2024, just goes to show how good he really is. Last year, the Lightning are obviously one of the best offenses in the league. Defensively, they were pretty stout as well. Vasilevskiy was among the best goalies across the board. Coming into this year, Sportsbook have the Lightning as the 7th best team in the league coming into the season with a projected point total of 103. So everybody expects them to be, very good again this year. Probably going to be top 10 defensively, top 5 offensively. Good squad. What are your thoughts here on Vasilevskiy, Beeps?
I love him. See, this is where I would be much more content with taking him with my second pick. We've kind of pointed it out here. He's second in basically everything, right behind Connor Hellebuyck. So if you do get him after getting a top end player with your first couple picks, if you say he falls to you, I'm super comfortable with that. This is a classic case of what you're getting. You mentioned he had a down year in 2014. That happened because he just destroyed his back and he came in late. We remember the season. It was insane. He even got 52 starts because he missed, I believe, a month and a half to start the year. Just shows how much they will lean on him. It's not Jonas Johansson is probably one of the worst backups in the league. So Vasilevskiy doesn't really have to worry about him pushing him for starts. And there's really just it's a clean, safe pick. It kind of reminds me of some of the D that we talked about in the defenseman episode where we mentioned they'll give you your 15 goal and your 70 point floor. That's what you're going to get here with a D man. So I don't mind taking him. It's pretty crazy until he shows us that he's going to slow down. I'm just not going to bet against that because last year he proved us all wrong. So, well, not all of us, but not this podcast. How do you feel about him?
I just think it's a little rich. Like I said, I think there deserves to be a little bit more of a buffer between Hellebuyck and him. I feel like a lot of people maybe are going into it with the hopes of getting Hellebuyck towards the end of the first round or start of the second, and then maybe panic a little bit and opt for Vasilevskiy. Look, I think he absolutely deserves the number 2 pick, but it's hard to shake that, that off season that he had a couple of years ago when that's just never happened for Hellebuyck. And like I said, that level of consistency just deserves that little bit more respect and like the nature of it and how it happened. You pointed out, Beebs, like the back injury. I just think as Vasilevskiy gets older, it's such a serious injury. I don't know. I'm just scared it's going to take a toll eventually. So I'm just a little bit afraid to invest that highly, given that little bit of shaky history. But to me, if obviously in a vacuum, the very clear number 2 off the board.
If you take a look at where he's going right now, just ahead of William Nylander, Jack Eichel, Kyle Connor, Jack Hughes, Mitch Marner, Evan Bouchard, Zach Werenski, passing on some really, really talented forwards.
I guess I'm not as excited. Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah. Like I agree though. Like if you are somebody that really wants a good goalie and Hellebuyck goes, like that's probably what's bumping Vasilevskiy's ADP up a little bit. People, there's a lot of owners that are going to be, really excited and want to get a goalie early. It happens all the time. And I think that he's quite clearly the number 2 best goalie, right? I feel like, Hellebuyck probably a tier of his own, and Vasilevskiy a little bit in a tier of his own, and then it starts to get a little bit murkier as you move down. So I could see why you'd want to reach, but yeah, it feels like a tough spot there. ADP of 14.5. Unsurprisingly, according to ADP, Hellebuyck is 1 and Vasilevskiy is 2. So we're right in line with ADP. As D said, goalies usually a little bit chalkier, but we do have some differences we will get to in a little bit. Let's get to our number 3 goalie, who is Jake Oettinger. I've got him at 3. So does Dylan. Beebs has got him at 4. His ADP is 19, so second half of the second round, which makes him the number 3 goalie off the board. So again, still in line with ADP there. I have some reservations with Oettinger, much like I do with the ADP of Hellebuyck and Vasilevskiy at 19. I think that is pretty rich. I think if all goes well this year, right, Dallas is really good, and he has another solid year. He's going to be a top 5 fantasy goalie without a doubt, but last couple of years, he's 6th in games started and 2nd in wins, right? So he's obviously elite, he can get it done. But the Stars were really bad defensively at 5v5 last year. The penalty kill was awesome, but the 5v5 metrics were awful. Ottinger's split suffered. He also didn't overcome a lot of those defensive deficiencies. He was 22nd among qualified goalies and goals saved above expected. So he was kind of just average last year, but had a ton of goal support, had a really good team, and that's going to be the case again this year. The Sportsbook have the Stars as the 5th best team in the NHL with an implied total of 106 points this year. The only other reservation I have is Casey DeSmith, D's boy, was awesome last year. As much as maybe Oettinger didn't cover up some of the defensive deficiencies in Dallas, DeSmith did. DeSmith was really, really good. 915 save percentage, 259 goals against average. Yeah, I don't know if necessarily this is a team that's going to be very good and has Stanley Cup aspirations. And when they've got a capable backup, maybe the game plan isn't for Oettinger to get 60 starts. And if he's closer to 50 starts, taking him with the 19th overall pick seems like a hefty price tag. D, you also have him at 3. Do you have, obviously we're high on him, but do you still have kind of the similar reservations with where he's going?
Yeah, I don't anticipate getting any Jake Oettinger, even though, like I said, I think he deserves to be the 3rd goalie off the board. I just, again, I think there's another tier here. I have him at the head of that tier for sure, but the next best goaltender we have ranked is going the full round behind him, right? And I think that's kind of close to where he should be. It's kind of just all the concerns that you mentioned, right? His splits just have not been that good for the last 2 seasons now. He's been sub 910 both years. Doesn't have quite as high of a workload for, again, the reasons that you highlighted, Brock, with DeSmith being there. I think that'll kind of continue to be the way. There's no reason to kind of shove 60 games down your starter's throat if you're intent on making a deep playoff run if you have a capable backup, right? So I do think he's going to finish closer to 55 starts this year as opposed to, plus 60 that we expect out of Vasilevskiy and Hellebuyck. And listen, plus 60, it's really rare, right? And that's why those guys are 1-2. They have the total package. They consistently deliver elite splits. They have great teams in front of them, and they're going to get a massive workload. And Oettinger just falls a little bit shy on those last couple of fronts for me. So, yeah, I totally agree. Again, I think he deserves to be the 3rd goalie off the board. I just do not love where he's going at all.
Bit of a spoiler alert here, but Daily Faceoff fantasy analyst Nick Zeman is a humongous Dallas Stars fan, and he has Jake Oettinger on his ADPs to avoid coming out on Thursday. So that kind of shows, even the biggest Stars fans don't love this ADP for Jake Oettinger. No. Beebs, you're actually the lowest of the 3 of us on him, so I'm assuming you share the exact same concerns.
Yeah, Nick and I are one and the same on this one, and working next to him as our resident Stars fan, he tends to tell me some things about Oettinger that scare me quite a bit, so I could definitely see why he was coming from there. As you mentioned, 19th ADP overall, yet last year he ranked 12th among all goalies in save percentage, 12th in goals against, and 23rd in shutouts. Yes, he gets the wins. He's going to get the starts. And as you guys mentioned, maybe even less starts this year. It's just a little scary for me. I think the guy behind him has shown he can do a bit more than what Oettinger can give us. And I think he's going to get about 5 to 10 more starts across a full season. We'll see. I don't know. This is total speculation. But as far as Oettinger goes, it's a little scary. These, like you guys mentioned, the last 2 years, he's given you very average stats. And if you're going to completely sell out and take, your first goalie off the board at this point, you can't afford a 905 or a 909 that he's given you the last 2 years. Like if it's the year before, he's where he had a 905, a 2.79 goals against average. You're panicking with that on your roster, and you're going to have to hit later. on another goalie or reach again, which is just going to hurt your general roster as a whole. So you guys mentioned it. This is just way too sweet of an ADP. He's definitely deserving of the 3-4 spot. I think this is the second tier, as you guys said, and I can agree with that. It's just I'm a little bit higher on the guy behind him, which is fair. I think there's a case for both. So.
Speaking of the guy behind him, we have Igor Shesterkin coming in at number 4. Beebs is the highest at 3. D, you've got him at 4. I'm the lowest at 6. His current ADP is 31.6, which is the 5th goalie off the board. So we are actually on a consensus 1 spot ahead of ADP. Shesterkin was the goalie that you guys had number 1 overall last year, and he was the number 1 goalie overall in terms of ADP, and ended up being a total bust. Only 27 wins, 286 goals against average, 905 save percentage, and his ADP was 16.8. I don't know if we can pin it all on Shesterkin, or really much of it on Shesterkin, when you consider the fact that the Rangers were just horrific defensively. They were downright awful. They were 28th in the league in goals expected goals against per 60 at 5v5. Shesterkin still ranked 11th in goals saved above expected. So he did his damnedest to help cover up those defensive warts. But my concern with him coming into this year is this team didn't change a whole lot in the offseason, right? Like, K'Andre Miller gone, Vladislav Gavrikov in. Nothing else has really changed. Taylor Radish is in. Some younger players, but this is pretty much the same team. I think that maybe they're not as bad as they looked last year. The sports books, they are kind of a middling team. They're the 13th best record, projected record coming into the league at 96 points, which is just inside the playoff picture. So yeah, I think there's a possibility this team's a little bit better, but I don't think that 30 wins is a foregone conclusion like it was for the 3 years previous, where he was 36, 37, 36. Like, the ADP feels better this year, right? 16th overall last year was high. This year, it's not quite as bad at 31.6. So I think that he has the ability to be a huge bounce back candidate. ADP 31.6. I think that you could be really, really happy with that at the end of the day. But Beebs, you're the highest on him overall. Why do you love Igor so much after a bit of a down year last year?
Yeah, it's just I think last year was a total anomaly. You talked about it. Everything was kind of going wrong. There was trades left and right. We saw their captain get moved before the year even really started, who was a key defenseman there. It's just he had 5 straight seasons before last year of higher than a 913 save percentage. That's absolutely bonkers. And I can't stop going back to his Vezina winning season from 21-22. He had a 935, 6 shutouts, 207 goals against average, 36 wins. Obviously, it's not the same team in front of him, but to even have that in your tank is something that I don't think Jake Oettinger brings to the table. And that's kind of why I think he deserves that 3rd spot. As mentioned, Oettinger the last 2 years, 905, 909. And before last year's 905 for Shesterkin on a very, very down year, as I mentioned, never gone below 913. So he does that. Another category that he fills is Ottinger's never really been a shutout guy, where Shesterkin's just known to go lights out for a couple games a year. As we've seen, his lowest shutout total in the last 4 years is 3 across a season, which would be 2nd highest for Jake Oettinger across his career. So I think that Shesterkin just has that ability to kind of steal games a bit more. And if this team does click, not even necessarily like they used to, but just a little bit better than last year, even pushing his save percentage from 905 to 910 and pushing his goals against average down to maybe a 2.5, that would justify the draft pick. You might have a few less wins than Oettinger. He's going to fall into a few more of those. But at the end of the day, I'm just a little bit more confident with the guy who's kind of proven. They're both very proven, but someone who's proven just a little bit better over time, and kind of has that superstar status, where I think Jake Oettinger's kind of just like a star. But both 2nd tier for me. I know you guys have him lower, so yeah. What's going on there, D? No, I'm just kidding. Totally makes sense.
I went back and forth with Shesterkin and the guy we have ranked next, and I do like the difference in ADP to probably wait on Shesterkin and try to get one of the couple of goalies in kind of that next tier. But I'm with you. I think it's just respect for the high-end talent that he possesses. And I think, we've talked a lot about how strong Zibanejad finished, and we're expecting a bounce back year out of him. And, some of their younger players are expecting to take a step forward. The sports books obviously expecting a bit of a bounce back year for the Rangers as well as a whole. And I just think he's good enough to where if he's getting 60 starts for a playoff team, like he's going to be a top 5 fantasy netminder. So it's a little bit of just kind of, goalies are inconsistent, and even the very best, save for Connor Hellebuyck, will have down years from time to time. And I just think last year for the Rangers, it was just kind of a season where everything went wrong, and for the reasons we've kind of laid out in the previous episodes already. But so expecting a little bit of a bounce back there, but I like I said, was going back and forth between him and the next guy on our list. And I do like his ADP a lot more than Oettinger, though. There's no doubt about that. It's a full round later.
Yeah, I think we'll all probably end up with more Igor Shesterkin than Jake Oettinger on our teams this year, even if we don't have him ranked higher. I will say that I've got him at 6. I think that he'll probably move up to at least 5. For me, just given the news here with Mackenzie Blackwood today. A little bit banged up, entering training camp. So I think that is enough to push Igor ahead of Mackenzie Blackwood, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. But
that's what changed my rankings already, was the news earlier today. So I had Blackwood ahead earlier.
Shesterkin will probably be 5 for me after that news. And then, it's not enough to change our consensus rankings overall. But yeah, I think the ADP is obviously a lot more palatable here. Palpable at 31.6. Speaking of ADPs that look pretty good, Sergei Bobrovsky comes up next. I've got him the highest at 4. D's got him at 5. Beebs has got him at 6. I'm going to save a little bit of chatter here about Sergei Bobrovsky for the second half of the show. But just want to get your guys' thoughts on him quickly. I'll talk about him a little bit more at length later. But just quick thoughts here on Sergei Bobrovsky, D.
I think he's due for a slightly larger workload this year, which is what is really attractive to me. Obviously, playing behind the best team in hockey, I don't think there's any arguing that at this point. But last year, he had Spencer Knight backing him up to start the season, and there were multiple reasons to try and get Knight into the net a little bit more and give Bobrovsky more off nights. Bobrovsky, last year, 35 years old. Spencer Knight kind of dubbed the goalie of the future. They burned a first-round pick on him, so it made a lot of sense to give him more run than the average backup. But I just don't think that's going to be the case this year, with Tarasov being second behind him in the depth chart right now, who's hasn't really flashed anything at the NHL level. I'm sure his numbers will improve behind Florida as opposed to Columbus, but I think they are going to need to lean on Bobrovsky a little bit more. Not like they'll be in any danger of missing the playoffs, but you want that number 1 seed in the division. Makes things a whole lot easier, especially in the Atlantic, to get that wild card matchup in round 1 and not have to play through the Atlantic the whole way through. I mean, although that hasn't really mattered to them or hasn't affected them too much the last couple of seasons. But I think that's going to be something to play for them for sure. But yeah, the reason I ultimately side with Shesterkin over him is that I still don't quite know if he's going to reach that upper limit of workload that Shesterkin might see. I think he's got a chance to touch 60 starts, but I do think if Tarasov is at all showing anything close to mediocre goaltending, league average goaltending, then, they may still look to settle Bobrovsky in around 55, maybe 58 starts, kind of where he's been in at the last couple of seasons. Because after all, he is 36 years old, and he's just less consistent than the average elite goaltender, right? Year to year, he was 906 last year, 915 the year before, 901 the year before that, 913 the year before that, 906. Got to go all the way back to 2017-18 season, last time he finished above 920. So the win totals are going to be fantastic, and above all else, especially in points leagues, that's going to be what carries you the most. But yeah, just a little bit of inconsistencies, and maybe doesn't quite have the high-end workload that Shesterkin does. But I love the ADP more, and I'm sure I'll end up with more Bobrovsky in redraft leagues.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising, right? Like just the profile is very similar to some of these other goalies, and just going so much later. But yes, I definitely want to talk about him a little bit later in the show. Beebs, we'll get to our number 6 goalie here with Mackenzie Blackwood, who we just mentioned. His current ADP is 24.5. We're going to probably see that drop. As I mentioned, I had him 5, but it'll probably be 6. You've got him at 5. D, you've got him at 6. Comes in consensus as our number 6 goalie, and his current ADP at 24.5 is the 4th goalie off the board. So we're a little bit lower on Blackwood, but given this injury news, I expect that the ADP will drop, and it'll probably fall closer in line with our consensus ranking here. But as of right now, he is considered week to week is the information we got today with a
Hoping
lower
to
body
be ready.
injury. Yeah, he's expected to be ready around the beginning of the season, so it doesn't really sound like anything that's going to linger too far into the season. But I think, whenever you hear lower body with a goalie, it's not something that you feel great about going into the season, especially if you're going to be using like a late second, early third round pick. But if healthy, right? Like, this is a goalie that is playing for one of the best teams in the NHL. According to the sportsbook, they're the 6th best team in the league coming into the season with a projected point total of 105.5. So, he was a goalie that you were always pretty high on, throughout his career, from New Jersey to San Jose, but obviously just they weren't great teams, and he never really got a chance to showcase how good he was until he went to Colorado last year, where he was unreal. 233 goals against average, 913 save percentage, 3 shutouts, 22-12 and 3 record in 36 games for the Avs. Beebs, obviously, as a resident Avalanche fan, you know as good as anyone, it was really, really impressive, especially to start, right? Like, he got off to just a remarkable start. He was 9-2-1 with a 938 save percentage in his first 12 games there. And then things slowed down a little bit, 901 save percentage in the next 25 games. So just curious what your thoughts are on Blackwood overall. Injury aside, do you think he's closer to the goalie we saw in the first couple games? Do you think he's closer to the goalie we saw in the last 25 games, or is it somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between, but I still think that holds an incredibly high amount of value. If anything, I kind of mentioned on Twitter when this injury first came out today, this could help us in drafts, this injury. If let's say it is just a minor injury and it doesn't linger, the lower body stuff, I agree with Brock, is absolutely terrifying, especially for a goalie. Let's say he comes back for even game 3 or 4 and he plays 78, 80 games. And you get full value out of Blackwood. And people treated him at the draft like he was an injured piece. You could have him fall down your board and you could get quite a bit of value here. But we've seen in previous years, I mean, I was high on Georgiev previously, not because of his talent. It was never because of Georgiev's talent. It was always the team in front. And now they actually have a goalie who can stop pucks. Pretty insane to say. So it's something to get excited about. I think even if he posts a 9-10, as we've seen across the league, that's kind of hard for some guys to get to lately. So if he does it as the 6th goalie off the board, you're going to be very content. He's still your first goaltender. And I mentioned it, or kind of mentioned it with Oettinger. He's going to fall into wins, but so is Blackwood. Wedgwood is not, the other Wood in town is not going to be stealing a lot of starts off him. He couldn't steal them off Oettinger either, so you don't have much to worry about there. I think you're getting fantastic value. I'll fully admit, coming into today, I had him up at 4, and then 2 hours later, the news came about the injury, so I moved him back a little bit here, but even still, I'm still willing to bet when he does get in there, he is going to give quite a bit of value, and I think, if anything, he's kind of a little bit of almost being slept on, but I think it's just because we're not too sure what we're going to get here. But he proved it in San Jose last year before he even came to Colorado, had a 911 save percentage. So if he can do it on a bad team like that, I'm pretty confident on what he can do here. Another injury in Colorado, though, Sam Girard is also likely out for a little bit, might not be back for the beginning of the season. And if that's the case, that's one of their 6 main guys. That puts Keaton Middleton in the lineup, likely, which is much, much worse defensively than Sam Girard. So looking a little worrisome in Colorado right now with the let's just keep all bodies off the ice for a little bit, because we saw it with Nichushkin. Now we saw this. I'm just a little worried.
Not the way you want to start the season. No. I guess Beebs did a really good job covering it there. So I'm just curious on your thoughts. Like, does Scott Wedgwood, I mean, I know they're saying they expect to see him early, but does Scott Wedgwood feel a little bit like the Jonas Korpisalo of last year heading into the draft season, where it's like, hey, might be worth a flyer early in the season, and if this Blackwood injury lingers, could be a nice pickup, at least for the first few weeks. Korpisalo stuff didn't work out great last year, right? Swayman signed pretty early, but Wedgwood seems like a guy that you might want to keep an eye on at the end of drafts, especially if you're really needy.
For sure. I think he's definitely worthy of a first-round pick, because if he's starting that opening night or opening week, whatever it is, like, you're going to want to pick him up anyway, especially if you have Blackwood. Like, I think if you go with Blackwood, I think Wedgwood becomes like a must in your draft, right? Like, I think that's a handcuff that you need, because I don't know about you guys, like, reading through the lines, I don't expect them to be ready for the start of the season. Like, we're 2.5 weeks away, and
like, why rush them, right?
Yeah, and you're saying it's week to week. Like, there's no definitive timetable. The lower body injury really scares me. It's just one of those moments where I just wish the NHL made teams be a little bit more transparent with the injuries. Like we see in the NFL, like once those injury reports come out, we know exactly what a guy is dealing with, or at least the body part that's ailing him. And yeah, lower body injuries are scary for goalies. Is it a knee? Is it a groin? Right? Those are things that can linger throughout the season. The fact that, they kind of phrase it that he's rehabbing right now. Yeah, I'm just scared. Obviously why I dropped him down my rankings to the 6th spot. That being said, like I think the upside is so good that I'm going to need the ADP to fall, but if he's there and all that's left is the guys that we have ranked behind him, I think his upside is that much better. But yeah, I think it's going to be more of you're going to have to really temper your expectations early on, because Wedgwood, I think, is a pretty serviceable backup. He's got a career 906. He was awesome for them last year when he came over in the trade. 917 save percentage, 1.99 goals against in 19 starts, picked up 13 wins, or 19 appearances anyway. So yeah, I think even once Blackwood comes back, it could be 2, 3, 4 weeks before he really kind of gets up to full speed, because at this point he's going to miss training camp. So yeah, there's some concerns, but the upside is obvious, and if he falls enough, I think it's worth chasing that upside. But I think you need to make Wedgwood a priority in your drafts if you do take Blackwood.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get on to number 7, where we all have Darcy Kuemper ranked 7th. His ADP is 54.4, which makes him the 7th goalie off the board. So we're right in line with ADP there. D, correct me if I'm wrong. He was your value pick last year?
Correct.
And he was every bit of that. He was just
crushed it.
Yeah, he was unreal. We talked about him a lot because we said, it's the guy that has been good in the past. And this is a Kings team that we know is among the best defensively. And they showed to be that yet again. They were first in 5v5 expected goals against per 60. They were second in scoring chances against per 60. Shot suppression was top 5. They were just unreal. And it ended up being a phenomenal year for Darcy Kuemper. He ranked 2nd in the NHL in goals against average, 3rd in save percentage, 6th in wins, 4th in shutouts, 8th in goals scored or goals saved above expected. So basically everything you could have hoped for and then some with Darcy Kuemper. Obviously going to cost a little bit more this year. I just want to see if I can pull up his ADP from last year. This is going to be tough. Let's see. It was 103.3. 103.3. So, obviously basically ADP was cut in half. And I think it's fair. This is a guy that on a night-to-night basis is going to give you the opportunity to win games with really, 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 really good splits. I guess the only concern is he's probably only going to start 50 games, which you saw last year, as opposed to some of these elite guys. But with the ADP price, I think that he's a really, really nice fallback option, right? Doesn't cost you a lot, and he's a really, really safe pick. It feels safer than some of the guys going right after him. So he's kind of like a buffer between the elite and then kind of like the upside guys. He's just like a safety blanket more than anything. But D, I'm assuming with him being your value last year, you ended up with him on a lot of teams and felt pretty good about him. Are you going back to the well here at ADP 54?
Correct. Yeah, this is kind of where I really like to start looking at the position and kind of just pick up one of these guys in the next tier and then maybe hit on a tandem guy or maybe a value pick a few rounds later. And like I said, just kind of patch together the position as the season goes on. But yeah, I agree with what you said. He just doesn't quite have the upside because I don't think there's any world where they want to give him 60 starts at his age, right? He's 35 years old. I don't expect Anton Forsberg to push him for starts, but I think they're just going to work him in more than the average backup simply because of his age, and with their defense and their structure, they can get away with, subpar goaltending back there a third or a quarter of the time. So that's really it. I think you hit everything on the head. He's a really, really safe pick, which is, I guess as safe as a pick as you can get at this position. And felt really rewarding to kind of look at what he did 2 years ago, how much he struggled, and chalk that up to Washington's struggles defensively are a big part of it. And we saw the difference when going from what Washington was a couple years ago and a really subpar defensive team to one of the best, if not the best in hockey. And that's not going to change this year for Kuemper. So really like the pick, really like the ADP, and I think he deserves to be at the top of this next year.
Yeah, incredibly safe. And it's kind of hilarious last year when we saw the PLD for Kuemper trade go down as a 1-for-1. And I think everyone was kind of like, oh, look, we're just dumping trash on each other. You get our trash, we'll take your trash. And both pieces of trash turned into gold and were fantastic. So good to see on both ends there. One thing that's kind of, I think Brock actually may have nailed the 50 starts on the dot for him, because I'm looking at Anton Forsberg, his new backup. And in the last couple of years, Anton Forsberg's played 30 games, 28 games. So that would leave about 52 to 50 games for Darcy Kuemper, and I like this one, as you mentioned. It's great at the spot it's in. Even if he drops down to a little bit worse than we saw last year, you're still going to get fantastic value. So it's a safe enough pick that you're not going to completely dismantle your team if you do take Darcy Kuemper. And I think this is a solid area of the draft to, like D said, kind of take your first goalie off the board if you have to.
It's going to be interesting to see, like, if the Kings can make Anton Forsberg a phenomenal streaming option. Like, I mean, they made Big Save Dave just an absolute stud 2 years ago. Guy had 250 goals against average, a 921 save percentage. So it's possible. I think Forsberg will be a serviceable streamer this year. But yeah, this is 50 starts for Kuemper for sure. Just to reiterate, they are a top 10 team according to the sportsbooks, tied for 9th with the New Jersey Devils with a projected point total of 99. Coming in next for us is Filip Gustavsson of the Minnesota Wild. I've got him at 8. So does Dylan. Beeb's a little bit lower at 9, probably just because he hates the Wild. His current ADP is 56.5, which is the 8th goalie off the board. So again, right in line with ADP here. You know, Gustafsson's kind of an interesting goalie, right? The Wild are pretty solid, kind of middle of the pack according to the sports books. Projected point total of 95. You know, he was good last year. You know, up and down. The Wild, though, like a team that's very solid defensively, you know, close to top 10 defensive club. And Gustafsson turned in a really solid year. 6th in goal in games played, 6th in wins, 6th in save percentage, 10th in goals against average, 4th in shutouts, 18th in goals saved above expected. So the Wild do a really good job insulating him. He's good enough. He wins enough games, but he just feels like he lacks upside a little bit. Like, I think you kind of just know what you're getting with him. He's similar to Kuemper, right? Like, I think it's not out of the realm of possibilities that he has a better season than Darcy Kuemper, but you know, he's obviously a little bit less consistent. And then obviously the fact that he's got, you know, maybe the best or one of the best backups, up and coming goalie in Jesper Wallstedt behind him, makes him a much riskier pick. So he already comes with a bit of inconsistency, and now you got Wallstedt behind him just kind of chomping at the bit. I think that makes him a little bit less valuable if Wallstedt ends up playing, you know, 30 games or 35 games. Like we talked about, Forsberg not posing much of a threat. Wallstedt does. So it'll be interesting to see there. But Beebs, you're the lowest on him. Is it just Wallstedt? Is it a combination of things? What is it?
Couple factors. I mean, Wallstedt is certainly one of the key factors. I'll say that much. You mentioned it, one of the top prospects, just kind of breathing down his neck. Last year, I think he kind of dropped because we thought there'd be a three-headed monster in Minnesota, but Wallstedt kind of took a step back and didn't provide what Minnesota wanted at that point. But that meant that Gustafsson could take that step forward. Realistically, though, besides last year's 58 games played, his career high in starts was 43, and before that, 37. He's only 27, so it's kind of hard to nitpick that. But he only really has had 1 year of taking a full volume of workload. And if he falls back anywhere close to what we saw in 23-24, where he had a 500 win percentage, had a 3.06 goals against, and an 899 save percentage, he could decimate your fantasy team. So I with him being taken around the same spot as Kuemper and the goalie that we're going to talk about next, I just think that they are a little bit safer. There's a little bit less risk of the guy behind them, as I mentioned, and I just I trust the rap sheet a bit more. So this was at this point I was kind of, you could go one way or another. Personally, I would choose the name behind him if I did have to choose between the two. But if you have to, I think that Gustafsson, just being on the team he's on, if you have to fall on him as your number one goaltender, I don't think it's going to be the worst case scenario. I just know personally I'd take a risk on some of the other guys around him first.
D, what do you think here? Like, Wallstedt obviously highly touted, but last year not good. So does he pose as much of a threat as we think? Like, obviously the future there. Do you think the Wild are going to give him a run? Plus, there's all this weird Kirill Kaprizov stuff going on right now. Does that worry you at all with Gustafsson?
Yeah, they both do. I'd be lying if I said I know what to expect from Jesper Wallstedt coming into the season, right? Like, he's had 2 cups of coffee in the NHL, has not looked great, but very young for the position. They obviously invested a lot with the draft capital. Had a bad year in the AHL last year. I think he was at like an 890. But obviously got a lot of talent. He's got a great frame to him for the position. And I think either way, like he's going to get a decent amount of run to start the season. Gustafsson's never really been a guy that handled a full workload. And they need to see what they have in him, right? Like eventually you got to figure out in terms of, are we going to have to look elsewhere at the position? Are we really just going to go forward with Gustafsson, or do we actually have one of the next best young goaltenders here? So I think he's going to get a lot of run. Who knows how that's going to play out, but I do think it's going to eat into his workload either way. And then, I just don't feel as great with that goal support, especially with everything that's going on with Kaprizov. You could probably make the argument there's no one more valuable to their team because of the relative surrounding cast than Kirill Kaprizov. And if he is traded, if there's any sort of holdout or whatever it may be, it's going to have an impact on Gustafsson's win totals, right? So, and on top of the fact that Kaprizov has had a hard time staying healthy the last few seasons. So, and then he's not the most consistent goalie. He's had bad years in the past. So there are worries here. I do still think the ADP is fair. They're going right in the same range, and I would just so much rather have Kuemper. But I don't want to totally write off what Gustafsson did last year, right? Like he was pretty solid the whole way through, and he was absolutely lights out to start the season. So, I think he's a good goaltender, a little bit streaky, like you said, Brock, and doesn't have as great of a team in front of him. So that's why he kind of falls where he does. But I still think it's a fair ADP for him.
Coming in at number 9 for us is Adin Hill. I've got him at 9. D's also got it at 9. Beeb's a little bit higher at 8. Current ADP is 57.9. So Kuemper, Gustafsson, and Hill all going with in a little cluster there. He's the 9th goalie off the board, so we're right in line with ADP yet again. Hill, obviously, no Logan Thompson last year. Saw a career high 50 starts, career high 32 wins, 247 goals against average, 906. Been under a 910 the last 2 years, but he's been fine, right? Serviceable. This is a team that's very, very good. The sportsbooks have the Golden Knights as the 4th best team. Tied for 2nd. The Panthers, the Oilers, and the Vegas Golden Knights all tied for projected points total of 107. So one of the best teams in the league. Akira Schmid, the new backup in Vegas as well. So going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I think that there's a world in which Adin Hill sees another career high in starts this year, right? Could be a guy that pushes for 55 and a guy that wins 35 games easily. If you put him and Gustafsson side by side, they feel fairly similar, but I feel like Adin Hill might have a little bit more upside, and Gustafsson might be just a little bit of a safer pick, I think, is the way that kind of breaks down. And I think the ADP being right next to each other makes a lot of sense. They feel very, very similar. But Beebs, you've got Adin Hill ranked the highest here. So obviously, just what I guess pushes him over the edge over Filip Gustavsson, for you?
Just basically the safety of it all. I think there's less risk of him losing that starting job or losing some starts. I like the team in Vegas a lot more. As you mentioned, their superstar in Vegas is not being shopped around right now for a trade. That's a little bit sexier to me. The goals against average is great. And Adin Hill's he's a safe choice. I also think still we haven't seen his ceiling, which is kind of crazy to say. Last year, as you mentioned, was the first year that we've seen him fully get a full starter's workload, and he did quite well. It seems he might be able to take a little bit more. They might have been a little hesitant to give him more than 50 last year, just knowing what he's done. So if they're willing to extend the leash a little bit more on Adin Hill, I think he will be a little bit better than Gustafsson. So I think it's a safer choice here. That's about it. But we are picking hairs at this point. And that's kind of what it comes down to with these guys for me. I had to go with the better team. Right?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Like for me, it's kind of, what's your format? I think in points leagues, Hill probably makes more sense because I expect to finish with slightly higher win total. I just trust the splits a little bit more in Gustafsson. I do think Akira Schmid will get a decent amount of work. Like their organizational philosophy, like since they've come into the league, has always been to never really lean too heavily on one goalie over another, and they try to keep their options open at the position. Obviously, a lot of that has had to do with the talent they've had, right? When they had Leonard and they had Fleury and they had Thompson and they had Hill. But I like Schmid looked really good in limited action last year. Year before that, struggled in New Jersey. Year before that, he was awesome in 18 games, right? So I do think there's a little bit of upside with Akira Schmid, and I still think I don't know if we've ever seen a Vegas goalie get close to 60 starts. I don't really expect that to happen this year. And Hill's just, hasn't really delivered the best splits over the last couple of years. 906 last year, 909 the year before. So kind of just comes down to the format for me. I think in points leagues, absolutely would rather have Hill. If I'm chasing wins, I think he makes more sense. But yeah, I think the worry about the splits and the fact that I do expect him to settle in around 50 starts is kind of why I have him where he's at. But I agree that it's a toss-up between the two.
Our number 10 goalie is Dustin Wolf. I've got him at 10. Beebs is at 11. Dylan's at 13. ADP 61.1, which is the 11th goalie off the board. So we're one spot ahead of ADP here with Dustin Wolf, but we're going to have a little bit more on him in the second half of the show. So let's quickly recap our top 10. At the position, we got Connor Hellebuyck of the Jets, number 1. Tampa Bay Lightning, Andrei Vasilevskiy, number 2. Jake Oettinger of the Stars, number 3. Igor Shesterkin of the Rangers, number 4. Sergei Bobrovsky of the Panthers, number 5. Mackenzie Blackwood of the Avs, number 6. Darcy Kuemper of the Kings, number 7. Filip Gustavsson of the Wild, number 8, and Adin Hill of the Vegas Golden Knights coming in at 9, and Dustin Wolf rounding out the top 10 of the Calgary Flames. Just quickly, our 11 through 15 guys that just missed out on our top 10. Logan Thompson was 11. I've got him at 13. Beebs at 10. D at 15. Jacob Markstrom is number 12. He is currently the number 14th goalie off the board. So we're 2 spots ahead on Logan Thompson, 2 spots ahead on Jacob Markstrom. We've got Anthony Stolarz as number 13, which is 1 spot below his ADP. He's the last, or like the number 12 goalie off the board, the last kind of number 1 option. And then Stuart Skinner coming in at 14, which is 10 spots ahead of ADP for Stuart Skinner. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in the second half of the show. And then Linus Ullmark rounding out the top 15 there. His ADP is the 15th goalie off the board. So straight in line with ADP there. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to talk about 3 values, 3 ADPs to avoid, and 3 breakout goalies. And we will send you on your way. Thanks for watching this video. If you want more great fantasy hockey and betting content from myself, Carter Hutton, Matthew Barnaby, and the rest of the DFO analysts, make sure you subscribe to the DFO Fantasy and Betting YouTube channel today and never miss a minute.